Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I was 18 in my final year of high school, and now at 27 the memories of that Halloween night still linger like a bad dream I can't quite wake up from. My friends and I were known for loving a good party, and Halloween gave us the perfect excuse to go wild. Costumes, music, cheap drinks, and the rush of feeling just a little untouchable. They always seemed to draw attention from the guys, laughing and flirting without much effort. Me? I usually faded into the background. It didn't really bother me, not on the surface anyway. That year the party was at Steven's house. Classic high school scene, dim lights, loud music, too many bodies in too small a space, and way too much alcohol. By 11 p.m., the cops had already been called because of the noise. We scattered before they could show up and start asking questions. Amy, my roommate and best friend, was heading to another party with her boyfriend. But instead of taking me with them, her boyfriend insisted I ride with his friend Dave. I didn't want to. Something about the idea of climbing into a stranger's car after midnight made my gut twist, but I didn't want to seem rude or dramatic. So I said yes. From the moment I shut the car door, I regretted it. The air inside was thick with the stench of old sweat and cheap cigarettes. Empty fast food wrappers littered the floor, and something sticky clung to my shoe. Dave didn't say much. He sat hunched over the steering wheel in a faded hoodie, blue jeans stained at the knees, and worn brown boots. A rubber mask rested in his lap. His hair was greasy, and a scruffy beard covered most of his face. He didn't smell great either. Trying to make it less awkward, I asked a few questions. Where he was from, what music he liked, the usual small talk. He gave short answers, barely more than a grunt. Finally, I asked where he went to school. I left university a few years ago, he said. Oh, so how old are you? I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated. 25. That hit me like a cold splash of water. 25. What was a guy that age doing at a high school party? He had left university 5 years ago. I hadn't even graduated high school yet. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. I tried to keep calm, to reason with myself. Maybe he was just tagging along with a friend, maybe this wasn't that weird. But then I asked how he knew Amy. He paused, his voice cracked. Who's Amy? My stomach dropped. I pressed myself into the seat like I could disappear into it. She's the blonde. She told me to ride with you, I said, trying to steady my voice. He looked straight ahead, blinking slowly. Oh yeah, her. She said you were single. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my chest tight. Fear crawled up my spine like ice water. I stared out the window, clutching my phone under my jacket, and shot off a message to Amy. What the hell, Amy? Who is this guy? She didn't respond. The next 10 or 15 minutes felt like hours. Finally, we pulled up to a house in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Not the kind of place we normally partied. The street was dark, lined with sagging fences and broken porch lights. I scanned for Amy's boyfriend's car. Nothing. Just shadow and silence. Dave didn't wait for me. He walked straight to a red door with peeling paint, barely lit by a flickering bulb. I followed him, hoping, praying, I'd find someone I knew inside. The air hit me first. It was cold and smelled like mildew, beer, and something worse, something rotting. Inside, the living room looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The carpet was a sickly olive green, matted and stained. The couch, round, brown, sunken in the middle, looked like it would collapse if anyone sat on it too hard. The white walls were streaked with grime and old water damage. Empty pizza boxes and crushed beer cans were everywhere. A man and a woman sat together on the couch, slumped into each other like they'd passed out or were too drunk to care. Their silence wasn't peaceful, it was eerie. Dave kept walking, so I followed him to the kitchen. The smell got worse. something sour and chemical. A guy, maybe 20, stood at the counter swaying slightly, pupils blown wide. He turned and gave me a smile that made every instinct in my body scream. It didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, how's it going?" he said, voice lazy, almost mocking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt like I was being sized up. Behind him stood another man, older, maybe mid-40s or 50. He didn't say a word, just stared at me like he already knew something I didn't. His eyes were hollow. Hungry. That was the moment it clicked. I had to get out, fast. I didn't know where I was. The neighborhood felt foreign, wrong, the kind of place where the streetlights didn't work and every shadow looked like it might move. Worse still, I had no idea who these people were, or what they were capable of. The anxiety was suffocating. I pulled out my phone and sent Amy another message, more desperate this time. Still no response. I considered calling her but stopped myself. My battery was down to 5%, and I knew I had to save it in case I needed to call for help. That fact alone, the possibility that I might have to call emergency services, tells you everything about my mental state at that moment. Dave eventually led me out to a screened-in porch, and for a split second, I felt some relief. There were 6 or 7 people out there, milling around. I wasn't alone anymore. 2 girls were among them, both so thin and scantily dressed they looked like they'd collapse if the wind blew too hard. Everyone seemed to stare at me the moment I stepped out, which sent a fresh wave of discomfort through my chest. But at least it wasn't just me and Dave anymore. I know it sounds strange, but I felt safer with a crowd, any crowd, than alone with him. That temporary sense of safety dissolved quickly. One by one, people drifted back into the house. Eventually, even the 2 girls left with the guys they'd been clinging to. Soon, it was just me and Dave again. I stayed seated, trying to act like I belonged there, like I wasn't frantically planning my exit. Then Dave leaned toward me and said, "You're really pretty," his eyes scanning me in a way that made my skin crawl. I forced a tight smile and shrugged. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound casual, like it didn't make my stomach twist into knots. Without warning, he stood up and moved behind me, then started massaging my shoulders. His hands were rough. He breathed heavily, far too close to my neck. I froze. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to move, to run, but I didn't. I was afraid that if I resisted too hard, he might react badly. So I sat there, tense as a steel rod, trying not to panic. I wanted to scream at Amy, to curse her for putting me in this position, but none of that mattered now. I was on my own. After 5 agonizing minutes, he finally stopped. He moved in front of me, crouched so we were eye level, and asked, "Want to go somewhere a little more private?" His voice was low, shaky, predatory. I swallowed the fear rising in my throat. "I'm not that kind of girl," I said, barely above a whisper. He didn't take it well. His face darkened in an instant. His jaw clenched, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He didn't speak, just stared at me in silence. The porch felt smaller. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the ambient noise. I felt tears starting to gather. I blinked fast, refusing to let them fall. But his whole posture had shifted. He was rigid now, looming over me. I braced myself, unsure what he'd do next. And then, chaos. One of the girls who had disappeared earlier came storming back out of the house, screaming incoherently. She was hysterical, throwing insults and threats at everyone, shouting about stabbing someone. Her voice cut through the air like a siren. It worked. Dave bolted upright and ran inside without a word, disappearing up the stairs. That was it. That was my window. I didn't think. I just moved. I jumped to my feet, bolted across the yard, and vaulted over the short wooden fence. My feet hit the ground and I ran. I didn't care where I was going. I didn't care that I didn't know the street or if I looked crazy. I just knew I had to go. I stuck to the sidewalk, clutching my phone and trying not to trip, street after street, heart thudding in my ears. And then, like a beacon, I saw the glow of a Walmart sign up ahead. It was open. Thank God, it was 24 hours. I sprinted through the doors and didn't stop until I reached the front counter. The manager looked at me, disheveled, shaking, and asked if I needed help. I nodded, the tears finally spilling over. He didn't ask questions. He and a couple of other employees gave me water, found a chair, and called my parents since my phone had finally died. They were only about 30 minutes away, and I clung to that number like a lifeline. Just as I started to relax, thinking it was over, Dave walked in. I saw him before he saw me. He had one of the guys from the house with him. My stomach dropped, and I ducked behind a display near the pharmacy counter, heart slamming in my chest. They looked around, every aisle, every corner, like they were searching for someone. I knew it was me. I stayed perfectly still until they finally walked out again. I didn't move until I saw my parents come through the sliding doors. The next day, Amy finally called. She was crying, apologizing over and over, asking what she could do to make it right. At least she confirmed that it was Dave she'd sent me with, that I hadn't gotten into the wrong car. Still, the damage was done. I was traumatized thinking about everything that could have happened. I forgave her eventually. She'd been drunk, careless, not malicious, but I made sure she knew how badly she'd messed up. It's been almost 10 years now. Amy and I aren't roommates anymore, but we still talk now and then. I've never seen Dave again, or that house, or any of those people, and I hope I never do. I know I was lucky that night. It could have gone so much worse, and no matter how much time passes, I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone. In my first year at university, I had to live in the dorms and was paired with a random roommate. I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. I'm pretty sociable and usually get along with people pretty easily. I imagined my roommate would be a decent, maybe even cool guy. Even if we didn't have much in common, I hoped we'd at least be able to coexist peacefully. After all, I didn't know anyone else at the university yet. When I moved into the residence hall, my roommate wasn't around. I knew his name, Ryan, because it was on the room assignment and some of his things were already there. A half-unpacked duffel bag, a few books stacked neatly on his desk, and a single poster of some obscure black and white movie pinned to the wall. My parents helped me get settled that day, hanging my clothes and helping me make the bed. But Ryan never showed up, not even by evening. He didn't appear until the next day. I'd just come back from my first class and had a short break before my next one. I opened the door to find him sitting at his desk, hunched over a textbook, scribbling something in a notebook. He didn't look up right away. Ryan was average, I guess. Not tall, not short. Slim, but not skinny. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and had short-cropped blonde hair. At first glance, there was nothing particularly off-putting about him, but he gave off this distant, closed-off vibe. When he finally turned his head to look at me, he gave me this once-over, cold, expressionless, and then just went right back to his notes without saying a word. I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe he was just focused, or tired. I forced a smile and said, "Hey, I'm Mark. Just moved in yesterday." I walked over, hand extended for a handshake, trying to break the ice. There was a moment, just a beat too long, where he stared at my hand like it was something foreign, maybe even threatening. But then, reluctantly, he shook it. We made a little small talk. He told me he was a second-year student from a small town a few hours away. I asked a few questions, where he was from, what he was studying, but he didn't offer much. No questions back, no real effort, just flat, clipped replies. At first, I chalked it up to shyness. Some people just take longer to warm up. But then, a few days later, he turned to me out of nowhere, voice low but sharp, and said, "Don't talk to me again, just leave me alone." The way he said it, calm but edged with something hard, caught me off guard. For a second, I just stared at him, waiting for a smirk or a laugh like maybe he was messing around. But he wasn't. He was dead serious. I decided not to push it. I wasn't looking for drama. If he wanted to do his own thing, fine. I figured we could just exist in the same space without bothering each other. He could stay on his side of the room and I'd stay on mine. As the semester went on, I noticed he was gone a lot. I'd wake up and his bed would be empty, or I'd come back late from class and he still wouldn't be there. Sometimes he'd disappear for days. No note, no text, just gone, and then show up like nothing happened. I never asked where he'd been. I already knew he didn't want to talk, and honestly, I didn't want to give him another reason to snap. But I was curious. One night he left the room around dusk. A few hours later, probably around 11, I heard shouting in the hallway. I paused whatever I was watching and cracked open the door. Two guys were yelling at each other, loud, angry. One of the voices was unmistakably Ryan's. He was shouting at some guy to shut the fuck up, over and over. The whole thing escalated quickly. The next morning I heard the full story from one of the other residents. Apparently one of the guys had just passed Ryan in the hallway and casually said, "What's up?" And that was enough to set Ryan off. He grabbed the guy by the collar, shoved him into the wall and told him never to speak to him again. The guy naturally fought back, swung a few punches. Ryan dodged them and bolted. That same guy, the one Ryan attacked, came to my door the next day. He leaned against the frame and said, "Hey man, you should watch yourself around your roommate. That dude's not right. Seriously." That was the first time I felt genuinely uneasy. Up until that point, I'd thought Ryan was just socially awkward or maybe dealing with something personal. But that was something else entirely. It was aggression with no provocation. A snap reaction that made no sense. From then on, I kept my distance. I didn't speak to him. He didn't speak to me. And weirdly, it wasn't all bad. Most of the time he wasn't even there, so it felt like I had the room to myself. But underneath that peace was something heavier, a quiet dread that settled deeper every day. I never knew when Ryan was going to show up or how long he'd be around. His comings and goings were completely unpredictable. Sometimes he'd vanish for days, then suddenly reappear like nothing had happened. One morning, I got up for class like usual. Ryan had left sometime during the night and still hadn't come back. I was gone most of the day, bouncing from lecture to seminar, and by the time I returned to our room in the late afternoon, I was tired and just wanted to relax. But when I opened the door, I froze. Everything on my side of the room, everything, was gone. The bed, the desk, the chair the university provided, they were still there. But every single thing I had brought with me was missing. My books, my clothes, my bedding, even the little basket of snacks I kept under the bed. Vanished. It was like I had never moved in. Ryan's side of the room was untouched, his blanket still rumpled on the bed, his notebook open on the desk, a half-empty bottle of water on the floor. But he was nowhere to be found. I stepped in, heart pounding, mind racing. I retraced my steps in my head. Had I locked the door when I left? I was sure I had. My gut told me exactly who was behind this. It had to be Ryan. No one else had access to the room, and it didn't look like a break-in. I crossed over to his side, hesitating for a moment before rummaging through his things. There wasn't much, just some clothes, a couple of notebooks, and a small drawstring bag. No sign of my stuff. No hidden stash in the closet or under the bed. That's when panic turned into something deeper. This cold, crawling unease under my skin. I wasn't just angry. I was scared. Who did I end up sharing a room with? I stormed out and headed straight for the resident assistant's room. My words came out fast, jumbled. Everything's gone. My stuff. It just disappeared. I think my roommate, Ryan, I think he took it. The RA came with me to look around. We checked common rooms, storage closets, even the garbage bins. Then we called campus security. But the building was old. No internal security cameras, No digital key logs. Nothing helpful. Thankfully, I had some good friends by then. One of them had a single room with an extra bed, and he let me crash there for a couple of nights while the investigation unfolded. Ryan didn't show up for 3 days, completely off the grid. But my stuff did turn up, just not where anyone expected. A campus security officer found it scattered in the woods near the edge of campus. Books soaked through from dew, clothes draped over branches, my blanket half buried under dead leaves. It was like someone had tried to get rid of it all but didn't bother to hide it well. Then 2 days later, they found Ryan. He was dead. His body had been discovered in the same patch of forest where my things had been found. The official report said it was an overdose. Heroin, they guessed. He'd likely been dead for days before anyone stumbled across him. In the pocket of his sweatshirt, they found a few of my things, a watch I'd gotten for my birthday, and the silver ring my dad gave me before I left for university. That confirmed what I already knew. He was the one who'd taken my stuff. Even with that knowledge, I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. Ryan was weird, sure, unstable, maybe even dangerous. But he was also just a young guy, like me. A person who ended up spiraling into something dark and lonely. I couldn't bring myself to feel glad he was gone. If anything, I felt sorry for him. But I couldn't stay in that room. I requested a transfer immediately. There was no way I could sleep in the same space where all of that had happened. Just walking by our old door made my skin crawl, and then something even stranger happened. A few days after the move, I was back in the hall grabbing some things I'd left behind. The room was still empty, untouched. But as I stepped inside, I heard it, Ryan's voice, just for a second. A quiet mumble, like he was muttering to himself the way he used to when he studied. Then the shower turned on. I swear I hadn't touched the light. I hadn't gone near the bathroom. The sound of water echoed in the room for 5 or 6 seconds. Then silence. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. Was it stress? Trauma? My mind playing tricks on me? Or was Ryan still there in some impossible way, lingering in the place he couldn't leave behind? I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed my things and left. I never stepped foot in that room again. I used to work in a care home for elderly and disabled people. It was a small place, privately run by 2 elderly women, Grace and Gertrude, lifelong friends who owned and managed the home together. Grace was the kind-hearted soul who actually owned the property. She handled most of the paperwork and resident affairs, while Gertrude, her business partner and roommate, seemed to float in the background. What always puzzled me, though, was that they lived alone on the upper floor, despite several unoccupied rooms. Why take up a whole flat just for themselves? Grace, sweet as she was, had started falling ill often. After meals, she'd spike a fever and throw up, episodes that left her weak and pale. My main job was housekeeping, and one afternoon while mopping the hall near the stairwell, I heard a fit of coughing echo through the house. I turned and saw Grace hunched on the stairs, looking like she could barely keep upright. I dropped the mop and rushed over. "Mrs. Grace, are you okay? Do you want me to call a doctor?" She shook her head weakly. No, doctor. I've just been under the weather lately. My stomach can't seem to handle anything I eat anymore." She looked up at me, her face flushed and eyes watery. "Gertrude usually gives me an injection, but she's out shopping. Would you mind helping me, dear?" I hesitated. I wasn't a nurse, but I wasn't totally clueless either. I'd grown up around hospitals because my father worked in one. So I gently helped her to her room, located just beside a sealed window, and administered the injection the way I'd seen done hundreds of times before. I figured she might be having an allergic reaction to something in the food, maybe one of the spices. Her room was modest, bed tucked in the corner, a nightstand cluttered with pill bottles. Just next door was Gertrude's room. As Grace slowly regained color in her cheeks, she sipped some water and thanked me softly. I sat with her for a moment, and curiosity got the better of me. "Mrs. Grace, If you don't mind me asking, why do you and Gertrude live in the same room? There are 3 empty ones on this floor." She sighed, placing her glass down. "Gertrude insists. She's not well, you know. Allergies, migraines. She gets spells. I help her with her medications and keep an eye on her. It's just easier this way." I nodded slowly but couldn't help noticing the overflowing nightstand and an empty bottle beside the others. The name on it was unfamiliar to me, and I mentally noted it down to look up later. Something about this didn't sit right. Grace's symptoms. They came after meals, the sealed window, the controlling roommate. Could Gertrude be making her sick? The thought disturbed me. I had no evidence, just instinct, but something in my gut told me this wasn't all as it seemed. Just then, the door slammed open and Gertrude marched in, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you come in here?" she barked. "You know the upstairs is off limits." I started to apologize, but Grace sat up and cut me off. "I asked her to help me, Gertie. I wasn't feeling well again." Gertrude didn't respond. She just stood there, stiff, her eyes locked on mine. The tension in the room was palpable. She didn't say another word, but I could tell. She was not happy I'd been in that room. That only fueled my suspicion. From that day forward, I kept a close eye on her. I started noticing little things, like how she always hovered near the kitchen but never really cooked, or how she often stayed up long after everyone else had gone to bed. Then, one night, I saw her sneaking around like a shadow, tiptoeing into the kitchen around midnight. I followed her as quietly as I could, hiding behind the stair rail. She slid something under the kitchen sink, a plastic bag. After a moment, she bolted upstairs, claiming she was going to get water, but she didn't turn on a single light. I waited, counted the seconds, then crept into the kitchen and looked behind the plumbing where she'd been. There, hidden behind some old rags, were stacks of money wrapped in crumpled newspapers. My heart thudded. Where had she gotten this cash? Was she stealing from Grace? The more I watched her, the more I was convinced Gertrude wasn't the caring friend she pretended to be. She had secrets, and I had just scratched the surface. She kept giving Grace more and more injections. Every time I asked, she'd brush it off with the same calm reply. "It's just to help with her pain, nothing serious." Poor Grace believed her. She thought her body was simply failing her, chalked it up to old age and bad luck. But then one morning, Grace fell seriously ill. She was delirious, shaking uncontrollably, and no matter what I or the paramedics did, she didn't recover. She passed away within hours. Gertrude told everyone Grace had died of natural causes. "Old age," she said solemnly. No one questioned her. No autopsy. No investigation. It was just accepted. After all, Grace was elderly, and people were used to death in that house. But I knew better. Or at least I believed I did. Almost immediately after Grace's death, Gertrude claimed ownership of the entire residence. She moved swiftly, opening the second floor to new tenants, rearranging rooms, and claiming Grace had left everything to her. I wanted to quit. Every bone in my body screamed for me to walk away. But I couldn't leave. Not with innocent, vulnerable people under her roof. I was convinced she had killed Grace. But I had no proof. Nothing to take to the police. Just my gut. Weeks passed, and the air in the house grew thick with unease. It was subtle at first, whispers, side glances, but the tension kept mounting. Then came Charlie. Charlie was a quiet man, mid-60s maybe, shy, polite, kept mostly to himself. One afternoon I saw him speaking to Gertrude in the hallway. He asked her timidly if the check his family sent had arrived. I paused behind the corner to listen. Gertrude's voice was cold. "No check came in your name this month," she said, brushing past him. But I knew she was lying. I'd seen her take that very envelope to the bank 2 days before. It had Charlie's name on it. I was sure of it. My stomach turned. Was she cashing residents' checks behind their backs? That night I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard something outside. Soft scraping, like digging. I pulled back my curtain, and there she was again. Gertrude, hunched in the dark, her figure illuminated by the moonlight. She was digging a hole at the back of the property and burying something. I leaned closer to get a better look, but just then, she stopped, straightened up, and turned to face me. Her eyes met mine directly, like she had known I'd be watching. I'll never forget the expression on her face. Her eyes were wild, empty, but blazing, and a slow, deranged smile spread across her lips. She looked like a monster out of a nightmare. My knees went weak and I stumbled backward from the window, locking my bedroom door in a panic. I stayed under the covers that night, heart racing, afraid she might come for me next. The next morning, I went to call Charlie down for breakfast, but his room was empty. His clothes were gone. His books, personal things, all vanished. I stood in the hallway, stunned. "Looking for someone?" Gertrude asked behind me, voice like ice. "Where's Charlie?" I asked, spinning around. "He went to visit his family," she said bluntly. "You let him go alone?" "He's a grown man," she snapped. "I don't need to explain myself to you." I stared at her, trying to keep my voice calm. "I know what you've been doing." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you think I don't know that you spy on me?" she hissed. "I bet you even steal from my room when I'm out, you filthy little witch." Before I could say a word, she lunged. The woman attacked me like an animal. She sank her yellowed teeth into my cheek, tearing at my skin with a strength that shocked me. I screamed in pain and shoved her off, my cries echoing down the halls. Residents came rushing out of their rooms. Someone called for help. That was it. I ran. I knew I had to get out of that place before I ended up like Grace, or Charlie. But I couldn't rest, not yet. I contacted Charlie's family, told them what I'd seen, what I suspected. They confirmed the worst. Charlie hadn't returned. They'd heard nothing from him. Alarmed, they called the police. From that moment, everything unraveled. The police questioned Gertrude and began searching the property. At first, they found nothing inside. But when they started digging up the backyard, where I'd seen her that night, it didn't take long. Within 5 minutes, news vans were outside. The backyard had become a crime scene. They uncovered 7 bodies, each buried with personal belongings. Some had been dead for months, maybe years. All of them murdered. Later, before the trial began, I asked to see her. I needed to look her in the eye one more time. She was behind bars, slouched on a bench in her holding cell, her face buried in her hands. For a second, I thought she might feel remorse. But then she looked up. Her eyes, full of loathing, met mine. A slow, bitter smile spread across her cracked lips. "I should have poisoned you too," she whispered, "along with Grace." That day. I'll never forget those words. They still crawl up my spine every time I close my eyes. I'll tell you this story, the kind that still makes my skin crawl, about something that happened when I was living with Leah, my ex-roommate. It was about a year ago, right after I graduated. I'd ended up renting a small house with Leah, someone I knew from university. We got along well enough, but we weren't really close, more like familiar acquaintances than actual friends. For most of the year we lived together, things were quiet. We both stayed in our own lanes, working, keeping to ourselves. The neighborhood was peaceful, tucked away from any chaos, and there had never been a single problem. But that calm didn't last. Everything unraveled during the final month of our lease. By that point, I'd saved up enough money to start looking for a place of my own. Maybe a small apartment, something modest. Leah, as far as I knew, was doing the same. We were definitely parting ways when the lease ended. Then one night, everything changed. I was in my room, awake late, just scrolling through my phone and half listening to music when I started hearing odd noises. Muffled footsteps, the low creak of the floorboards. At first I figured Leah had company. It wouldn't have been unusual, and my door was closed anyway, so I didn't think too much of it. But then I heard her scream. A real, blood-curdling scream. Before I could even move, bam! My bedroom door exploded open. I looked up, heart thudding in my chest, and froze. 3 men, all dressed in black from head to toe, faces hidden behind masks, stormed in like something out of a nightmare. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My brain short-circuited, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Who the hell were they? What did they want? Were they armed? One of them stormed in and immediately began tearing through my things. The other 2 pointed at me and motioned for me to stand in the corner. "Don't move," and one of them barked, low, cold, and calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. I obeyed without question. My body had turned to ice. I stood there, heart hammering, watching as they ransacked my room. My belongings were tossed aside like trash. Books, drawers, bags, clothes, everything on the floor. They grabbed whatever they could. My phone, my laptop, wallet, a few pieces of jewelry. Anything of value was stuffed into duffel bags like it was all part of some military operation. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Then, just as suddenly, they left my room and went straight to Leah's. I could hear her pleading, crying. But it was all happening so fast, less than 5 minutes total. They didn't even say much to us, just chaos. Grab what you can, go. And then they were gone. I stood there for a second, completely stunned. My body finally began to move again. I walked into the hallway in a daze and saw Leah sitting on the floor outside her room, shaking. Her eyes were wide and wet with tears, but she was physically okay. We both were, and that was the only thing we could hold on to in that moment, that at least they didn't hurt us. But they had taken everything. Neither of us had our phones, so we had to go next door and wake up a neighbor to ask him to call the police. I'll never forget how surreal it felt. Barefoot, rattled, trying to explain through the door what had just happened while the adrenaline still buzzed in my blood. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. We told them everything we could remember. They took notes, said they'd patrol the area, but I could already tell they didn't expect to find much. Whoever those guys were, they were long gone. I hadn't seen if they got into a car or anything, but I doubted they came on foot. I kept going over it in my head. How did they get in? I thought I'd locked the door. I always did, but maybe I forgot. Leah swore she thought she'd locked it too, but honestly, neither of us could remember for sure. It was just chaos. After that, I did the only thing I could. Bought a new phone, started reapplying for my license, canceled cards, filed forms. Total nightmare. I had no laptop, no ID, no money. Everything was gone. I spent the next several weeks drowning in paperwork and stress. That night, though, it never left me. The way those masked men moved, silent and controlled like they'd done it before. The way Leah screamed. The way the room looked afterward. Violated, torn apart. It's something you don't forget. After the break-in, it took me several days just to feel like a functioning human again. I couldn't sleep properly, kept jumping at every noise, and my thoughts spiraled constantly, replaying that night over and over. But I didn't have the luxury of wallowing in fear. Our lease was up and I had to hustle to get moved into my new apartment. Still, something kept gnawing at the back of my mind. During those last 2 weeks I spent in the house with Leah, I started noticing something strange. Her laptop, it was still there, untouched. While mine had been stolen in broad daylight, hers had somehow survived the chaos. I asked her about it one afternoon while we were cleaning up the mess. "Oh, it was under a blanket," she shrugged. "They must have just missed it. Got lucky, I guess." Lucky. That word hung in the air like smoke. I didn't say anything at the time, but it bothered me. Really bothered me. The way she said it. Too casual. Too easy. A laptop under a blanket doesn't exactly become invisible. But I convinced myself not to overthink it. The situation had already been traumatic enough. I pushed the thought aside, tried to move on, but I couldn't ignore how uninterested she was in pursuing justice. I called the police department several times in the days that followed, checking in about the investigation, hoping for a lead, anything. Leah, on the other hand, kept telling me to let it go. "They're long gone," she said. "We're not getting any of it back." Her dismissive attitude was unsettling. I couldn't understand how she wasn't angry, or even curious about who had done this to us. Something about it felt off, forced, like she was trying to shut down the topic too quickly. By the time I moved out, I was emotionally drained. But I still had the keys to the house, and I'd told myself I'd come back on the last day of the lease to give the place a proper cleaning. I hadn't told Leah, though. I figured I'd just do it quietly, leave the keys on the counter, and never look back. When I pulled up that afternoon, there was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. Something told me to stop. I parked across the street, engine off, and waited. It was instinct, just pure gut feeling. Minutes passed, then the front door opened, and I saw 3 men get out of the car, each carrying large rucksacks. They walked right up to the front door, and Leah was there waiting, smiling. She let them in without hesitation. My heart started pounding. I couldn't see their faces clearly, not from that distance, but something clicked in my mind. Those men moved like the ones from that night. Quick, practiced, silent. Everything about it felt wrong. I waited, watched. After a short while, the men came back out, but this time, their bags were gone. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of my car, crossed the street, and walked straight into the house. Leah looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. That look, pure shock, almost guilt, told me more than I needed to know. "You didn't expect me, did you?" I said, shutting the door behind me. She fumbled for words. What are you doing here?" "I saw them," I said coldly. "The guys who just left. Who were they?" She hesitated. "Just friends. Old friends. You're reading too much into this." "Cut the crap, Leah," I snapped. "I know what you did." She tried to dismiss me, wave it off, even told me to leave, but her face was red, her voice shaky, and I could see the guilt crawling out from behind her eyes. I didn't argue. I just turned around, got into my car, and drove straight to the nearest police station. I gave them everything. My suspicions, the car description, the bags, the weird behavior, Leah's reaction. The officer didn't seem surprised. In fact, he told me they'd been investigating a group of men suspected in similar robberies. A few days later, the truth came out. One of the pawn shops nearby had contacted the police after someone tried to sell them a laptop that matched the serial number of mine. The employees were sharp enough to realize it was likely stolen and reported it. The suspects were tracked down and arrested, and Leah was tied to the whole thing. She confessed. She had staged the entire robbery. She'd let those men into our home, helped them steal from me, and even faked her own panic just to make it believable. She was willing to destroy our safety, our trust, and whatever relationship we had, all for about $33,000 worth of stolen belongings. After that, I made myself a promise. I will never live with another roommate unless it's someone I know inside and out. Someone I trust completely. Because what happened in that house wasn't just a betrayal. It was a violation of everything I believed about the people close to me. And that's something I'll never forget. When I turned 22, I moved to Michigan for school. Money was tight, so I scoured Craigslist for something affordable. That's when I found a shared flat, 2 bedrooms, just a few blocks from campus, and the rent was surprisingly low. It seemed perfect. I reached out to the current tenant, a girl named Charlo. She was 20, tall, with jet black hair and pale skin. Her heavy makeup gave her a kind of ghostly appearance. Despite her quiet demeanor, she seemed nice, if a little odd. Still, we got along well enough during our brief conversation, and she told me I could move in right away. To celebrate, we went out for pizza. That's when things started to feel off. Between bites, she kept saying, "You know, you really look like Brad Pitt." At first, I laughed it off. Who wouldn't be flattered? But it kept coming up. "Seriously," she said, staring a little too long. "It's like looking at him in real life." The thing is, I don't look anything like Brad Pitt. Not even a little. So I wasn't sure if she was joking, seeing something I didn't, or just trying to flatter me for some odd reason. It made me uneasy, but I didn't want to be rude. Later that evening, when we got back to the apartment, she asked if I wanted to see her room. I didn't think much of it and said sure. But the second she opened the door, I was hit by this intense, cloying scent of perfume. It was overpowering, sweet, chemical, almost sickly. Then I saw the walls. They were covered in Brad Pitt posters, dozens of them. Every available space taken up by magazine clippings, movie posters, even low-resolution printouts. Photos were taped to the mirror, some candid, some obviously paparazzi shots. On a shelf, every single one of his movies was arranged in chronological order. It wasn't just fandom, it was obsession. I stood there frozen, and then she looked at me with this strange, childlike smile and said softly, "You really look like him." A chill ran down my spine. It was clear she wasn't joking. This was something deeper, more troubling. I forced a smile and made some excuse to go to my room. After that, I kept my distance. Over the next few weeks, I barely saw her. She'd come home from her job and head straight to her room without saying a word. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear a weird, muffled giggle through the wall. Not laughter, more like a soft, eerie tittering that didn't sound right. Other times, I'd be sitting in the living room reading or watching something, and I'd suddenly feel eyes on me. I'd look up, and there she'd be, just standing in the hallway, staring, motionless. I'd try to break the tension. "Hey, Charlo," I'd say with an awkward wave. She wouldn't respond, just that blank, unreadable face. Then slowly, that same giggle would escape her lips. Quiet, high-pitched and chilling. I started to feel trapped in my own home. My nerves were constantly on edge. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the front door creaking open. My heart was pounding. I knew Charlo had already been home that night, and I hadn't heard anyone leave. I got out of bed cautiously and stepped into the dark hallway. All the lights were off. At the door stood Charlo, her face pressed right up against it, one hand twisting the bolt lock back and forth, back and forth. "Fred, Fred, Fred." She whispered my name like a chant, over and over, almost in a trance. The sight of her like that, barefoot, motionless except for her hand whispering in the dark, froze me. It was genuinely terrifying. I forced my voice to sound steady. "Charlo, are you okay?" She didn't move. Then slowly, without turning her body, she rotated her head toward me. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide, unblinking. I didn't know what to do. After a few seconds, she turned and walked silently back to her room, closing the door behind her. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I started looking for a new place to live. I didn't care what it cost. Something about that apartment, about her, was deeply wrong. I was halfway through my breakfast, black coffee, soggy cereal, when the doorbell rang. I figured Charlo was still asleep. She usually didn't stir before noon. So I wiped my hands on a towel and went to answer it. 2 uniformed police officers stood there. Their expressions were stony, unreadable, and one of them stepped forward. "Does Charlo live here?" he asked, voice clipped. I blinked, thrown off by the serious tone. "Yeah, she's my roommate. Why? What's going on?" The taller one exchanged a look with his partner before saying, "We have a warrant for her arrest. She's wanted in connection with the murder of Ethan Diaz." For a second, the world just stopped. "Ethan Diaz?" I repeated, my mouth suddenly dry. "Wait, what?" "He was her former roommate," the officer said. "We need to speak with her immediately." Before I could even fully process the words, there was a loud crack, a shattering sound from Charlo's room. Glass, the window. The cops shoved past me and rushed down the hall. I stumbled after them, my legs numb. They tried the door. It was locked. "Charlo!" one of them barked, pounding on the wood. "We know what you've done. Open the door or we're coming in." Silence. The officers didn't wait long. With a few hard kicks, the door gave way, crashing open, and what we saw made my blood run cold. The window was wide open, shards of broken glass littering the floor. Curtains flapped in the breeze. But Charlo was gone. She'd jumped. The room was a nightmare. The air was thick with rot, a putrid, wet stench that hit like a punch to the gut. Furniture overturned, clothes and papers scattered across the floor like a storm had passed through. One officer stepped cautiously toward the closet, hand on his gun. When he pulled the door open, we all recoiled. Inside was a corpse, bloated, decomposing, the skin sagging and crawling with worms. It was wearing old, tattered clothing and a paper mask. A grotesque, hand-cut image of Brad Pitt's face, yellowed and stained. The mask was peeled away, and underneath, the true horror revealed itself. The victim's face was mutilated, deep slashes, burns, raw patches of melted skin. It wasn't just a killing, it had been torture. Within hours, forensics arrived. The body was confirmed as Ethan Diaz, Charlo's former roommate. A 20-year-old who had gone missing months ago. No one had suspected a thing. The police launched a manhunt describing Charlo as dangerous and mentally unstable. I was told to leave the apartment immediately. They sealed it off with crime scene tape. I checked into a cheap motel nearby, still shaking, and called my parents. My mother cried. My father didn't speak for a while. "Thank God you're safe," she finally said. A few days later, while hunting for a new apartment, I saw her. I was standing across the street from a bus stop when I noticed a figure, slim, still, wearing a Brad Pitt mask. She didn't move, just stood there watching. Even from across the road, I knew it was her. My stomach dropped. I fumbled for my phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, she had vanished. From that moment on, I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept catching glimpses of her in crowds, reflections, windows. Was she following me? Or had my mind finally cracked? I couldn't take it. I packed my things, withdrew from school, and moved to another city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I needed distance. She had looked at me like I was someone else, someone famous, worshipped. That look, obsessive, devout, haunted me. I started to think her reappearance wasn't a coincidence. It was a warning, a silent threat. Not long after, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood premiered. Billboards of Brad Pitt were everywhere. I passed one every day on my new route to work, trying not to look. But then one morning, traffic stopped. People were gathering, murmuring, pointing upward. Police cars, sirens. I stepped out of the crowd and looked up, and there she was, Charlo, hanging from a thick black electric cable slumped against the giant image of Brad Pitt on the billboard. Her clothes were shredded, caked in dirt. She looked like she had been living in the woods, her long black hair whipped in the wind. But she wasn't laughing this time. She just hung there, her body gently swaying, her eyes open and lifeless, fixed on the sky above her. Her face, once painted and made up, was bare and twisted. The police said she had climbed the billboard in the night and grabbed a high-voltage cable. They ruled it suicide. But it felt like something else, like the final act of devotion, a mad woman's offering to her God. And in a way, her expression made sense. Because in death, looking up at her idol, it looked like Charlo had finally found peace. We've all had roommates at some point, right? Sometimes they're a blessing, other times a complete nightmare. Let me tell you about one particular experience I had with my girlfriend, Angela. Angela and I had just graduated college and were stepping into the chaotic world of adulthood. We landed entry-level jobs at different startups, both in social networking app companies, but the paychecks weren't exactly generous. Definitely not enough to afford rent in the city on our own. We spent days scrolling through listings hoping to find something livable. Then we came across this apartment online. It looked perfect, bright, spacious, modern, but slightly out of our budget. Still, we were smitten with it. And besides, the landlord was warm and welcoming, and he told us we wouldn't have to cover the rent alone. He'd already arranged for another tenant to share the place with us, a guy named Andre. We weren't thrilled about sharing, but realistically, we didn't have a choice. We met Andre once before moving in. He showed up wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy, and barely spoke. There was something off about his demeanor. Detached, almost rehearsed, but we brushed it off. Lots of people are awkward in new situations. I told Angela it was fine. We're not going to live with him forever, I reminded her. That seemed to calm her down, and we started packing. When move-in day came, Andre hadn't arrived yet, but the landlord handed us the keys anyway. The apartment was even better in person. Wide open spaces, tall windows, clean walls begging for a personal touch. It felt like a fresh start. A real stroke of luck. Angela wasted no time making it feel like home. She hung some framed photos from college, one of us at graduation, another from a beach trip, and tossed a colorful throw over the couch. We unpacked, joked around, ordered greasy takeout, and wandered the rest of the place until we came to a locked door. That was Andre's room. We looked at each other, a little surprised, but ultimately decided it wasn't weird. Everyone's entitled to some privacy. The first few days were smooth. We scrubbed the place from top to bottom. Angela, yanking off her rubber gloves after wiping down the kitchen, grinned at me and said, "It's finally starting to feel like home." But then came the night Andre finally arrived. Angela and I were just getting ready for bed when we heard the front door creak open. She sat up fast, looking alarmed, and I followed her out into the hallway. We expected a greeting at least. Instead, Andre walked in, eyes forward, no expression, and headed straight to his room. The door shut with a click. Not a single word. Angela raised her eyebrows and muttered, "Wow, rude." "Maybe he's just tired," I said, trying to sound reasonable, but I wasn't convinced either. There was something unsettling about the way he moved. Too deliberate, too quiet. We tried to shake it off. We curled up in bed with snacks, watched a few romantic comedies on Netflix, and pretended everything was normal. But something about the apartment felt heavier now, like the air had thickened. I couldn't put my finger on it, but that brief, silent encounter with Andre left me uneasy. The next morning, I woke up early while Angela was still asleep. I stumbled into the kitchen, still groggy, and started making coffee. The room was quiet, except for the bubbling of the coffee pot. That's when I noticed someone in the corner of my eye, Andre. I turned, startled but trying to be friendly. "Good morning," I said, offering a sleepy smile. He didn't answer. Instead, he just stared at me, his eyes roaming slowly from my face to my shoes. The silence stretched just a second too long. Then he said, "Nice shoes. They look expensive." I blinked, caught off guard. My shoes. Right. I'd left my designer sneakers in the hallway the night before. Took me months of saving to buy them. I chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, they were a bit of a splurge. Andre didn't smile. His face stayed blank, unmoving. Then he said, in a voice so flat it gave me chills, "Take good care of them. You don't want to lose them." I stood there, coffee forgotten, unsure how to respond. His eyes lingered on me for a second more, and then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into his room. That's when I started to wonder, what did he really mean by that? When Angela finally woke up, I told her about the strange exchange I'd had with Andre that morning. She rubbed her eyes and mumbled something about it being weird, but she was still half asleep and not fully registering what I was saying. So we dropped it and got on with our day. We were running late for work when I realized I couldn't find my old iPhone. It wasn't the newest model, sure, but it held a lot of memories, photos, voice notes, even a couple of sentimental texts I couldn't bring myself to delete. I searched the living room, the kitchen, under the cushions, nothing. I asked Angela if she'd seen it. "My phone's dead," she said, scrolling through her morning messages before the screen went black. "Want me to charge it and we'll call yours?" We tried, but my number just went straight to voicemail. Turned off. Odd, since I always left it charging overnight. "I'll look again when we get back," I said, shrugging it off for now, though a slight unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Later that evening, Angela and I were chatting on the couch after dinner, and the topic turned to Andre. "Does it creep you out how he talks without blinking?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. "Yeah," I admitted. "It's like he's trying too hard to seem normal." And failing. We both laughed nervously, but underneath the humor, there was tension. Something about him felt off. That night I got home from work a little earlier than usual. Angela wasn't back yet, but Andre was. I caught him walking down the hallway and figured it was a good time to ask. "Hey, have you seen a phone lying around? An old iPhone, silver case?" He stopped, turned, and gave me a look I didn't quite understand. His face twisted, and then out of nowhere he snapped. "What would I want with your crappy old phone?" he barked. "It's slow, outdated junk." That hit me sideways. "How do you know it's old?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. He stared at me for half a beat too long, then turned without a word and closed his bedroom door. Hard. I stood there, stunned. I didn't see or hear from him again the rest of the night. The next day was Saturday. Angela and I slept in and didn't crawl out of bed until almost noon. We had a quick breakfast, coffee and toast, and then decided to go for a walk to clear our heads. Halfway through the park, Angela stopped mid-sentence. "Wait, have you seen my earrings?" "Which ones?" I asked. "The little gold studs. I left them on the table yesterday." I froze. That table had been completely empty this morning. When we got home, we searched the apartment top to bottom, every drawer under the couch behind the TV. Nothing. There was only one room left. Andre's. A knot tightened in my chest. First my phone, now her earrings. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pattern was too suspicious to ignore. We stood outside his door for a moment. It was locked, as usual. "I don't like this," Angela whispered. I didn't either. 3 people lived in this apartment. Things didn't just vanish. We spent the rest of the day trying to distract ourselves, went to dinner, strolled through the night market, but unease clung to us like a damp coat. We got home around 9:30 p.m. I figured some gaming might help me unwind, so I went upstairs to turn on the PS4, except it wasn't there. The shelf where it sat was completely bare. My stomach dropped. I didn't waste time. I marched straight to Andre's room and tried the handle. Locked. I knocked. No answer. "Call the cops," I told Angela, and she didn't even hesitate. The police arrived quickly and began searching the building. An hour passed. Nothing. Andre was gone. They decided to call a locksmith to force the door open. When it finally swung open, we stepped inside, and I was stunned. Andre's room looked like something from a catalog. Pristine, minimalist. The bed made with crisp corners, a sleek desk with nothing but a single notebook and a pen on top. It looked more like a hotel room than someone's actual living space. The police searched every inch but found none of our missing items. "We'll be in touch if anything turns up," one officer said before leaving. Angela and I just stood there, staring at each other, more confused than ever. Then her phone rang. It was the police. They had located Andre's car a few blocks away and were impounding it. We drove over to meet them. As they opened the trunk, a pile of things came tumbling out, an avalanche of stolen objects. My PS4, my old iPhone, Angela's gold earrings, and a bunch of other stuff we didn't recognize. Andre was arrested not long after. Apparently, he'd been keeping things from multiple people. Quiet, methodical, invisible theft. In the aftermath, we got a new roommate. A normal one, thankfully. Angela and I came away from that whole ordeal with a lesson burned deep into our minds. Trust your gut. No matter how desperate you are, never ignore those subtle signals. The way someone speaks, the way they look at your belongings, the way their presence shifts the atmosphere. Not everyone is who they pretend to be. Appearances lie. And sometimes peace of mind is worth far more than comfort or convenience. My name is Katie. I'm 31 now, but this happened 5 years ago when I landed a great job in a new city. It was the kind of opportunity I couldn't turn down, so I packed up my life and moved. Starting over was intimidating, but things got better quickly, especially when I met Sarah. She was 30, just a year younger than me. Brilliant, magnetic, the kind of beauty that turned heads without trying. We hit it off immediately. Sarah had been working at the office for a few years by then, and when she found out I was looking for a place, she offered her apartment. She'd been living alone, but her previous roommate had just moved away. "You can move in with me," she said casually, "if you don't mind sharing." I didn't. It was perfect. Living with her turned out to be even better than I expected. We became close, really close. After work, we'd hit bars, explore the city's nightlife, sometimes staying out laughing until morning. She had a boyfriend, Harris. From the outside, they seemed happy, but one night everything changed. I was already home when she returned from a date, eyes red and shoulders shaking. She slammed the door behind her and dropped her purse like it weighed a ton. "Sarah?" I asked gently. "What happened?" She tried to shrug it off, but then crumpled on the couch. "He cheated on me," she said through tears. "He's marrying someone else. All this time, it was a lie. He said he couldn't be with me anymore." My stomach dropped. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I don't want to see his face ever again. I trusted him. Every promise, bullshit." Her voice cracked, and the sobs came harder. I sat beside her and did what I could, held her hand, let her cry. "Don't waste your tears on someone who never saw your worth," I told her. "It's not your fault. You deserve so much better." The next few days were tough. She barely ate, barely spoke. I'd hear her crying late at night. I stayed close, kept her company, reminded her that she wasn't alone. Slowly, piece by piece, she began to rebuild. After about 3 weeks, she smiled again. Not the full, carefree Sarah smile I loved, but something like it. I took it as a good sign. One afternoon, she left the office early. "My little sister's visiting," she said. "I'll be home late." She seemed distracted but calm. That evening, I was on the couch when I heard someone pounding frantically on the door. I opened it and froze. It was Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, and a fresh bump swelled on her forehead. "Oh my God, Sarah, what happened?" I rushed to her. She didn't say a word. "Are you okay? Were you mugged? Do you need to eat?" I asked, trying to piece together the scene. Still nothing. She moved past me like a ghost, walking stiffly into her bedroom, her arms hanging at her sides like they didn't belong to her. I noticed she wasn't carrying her phone. No bag either. My stomach turned. I tried again. "Sarah, talk to me, please." But she shut the door behind her, and I didn't have the heart to push her further. The next morning, I heard clattering in the kitchen. I peeked in and saw her at the stove. She was cooking fish. That might not sound strange, but Sarah was a strict vegetarian. She hadn't touched meat in years, not even gelatin. I didn't say anything. Maybe this was grief, still twisting her in unpredictable ways. We sat down to eat. She didn't look up once. When I asked what happened to her phone, she said simply, "It was stolen on the way back." After breakfast, we went to work like it was any other day. We even shared a cab home. That's when things started unraveling again. Sarah kept staring out the window, murmuring things I couldn't quite make out. I leaned in, concerned. "What was that?" She turned to me suddenly. "What if I jump out?" I blinked. Wait, what? Sarah, are you serious? But before I could stop her, she twisted the handle and pushed the door open. Sarah, no. And then she was gone. I screamed as the driver slammed on the brakes. The jolt threw me forward, nearly into the front seat. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. The driver was yelling, but I barely heard him. I was already clawing at the door, desperate to get to her. We both ran towards Sarah. My heart was hammering in my chest and tears blurred my vision. Sarah, are you okay? I cried, kneeling beside her. She didn't answer. Her eyes were distant, staring at nothing. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might have lost consciousness. But then, slowly, she reached up, rubbed the bump on her head and, without saying a word, stood up and started walking like nothing had happened. She was clearly in shock, but at least she was alive. I kept close to her side, watching every move she made. Something in her eyes wasn't right. Her body was moving, but her soul felt absent. I told myself it was the trauma from the breakup. That had to be it. She was spiraling, still emotionally wrecked from Harris's betrayal. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more, something darker. I begged her to go to the hospital just to get checked out, but she refused flatly. Eyes glazed over, mouth set in stone. I'm fine, she said coldly. Just leave it. The next day, I tried to lift her spirits. I bought us cinema tickets and took her to a late showing. I thought the distraction would help, and for a while it did. We laughed, shared popcorn, made sarcastic comments about the previews like we always did. For a couple of hours it felt like I had her back. When we got home she seemed lighter, almost cheerful. Want to watch something else? She asked. There's a horror film on Netflix I've been dying to see. I hesitated. Horror's not really my thing. It's a good one, she insisted, her voice eager but somehow off. Okay, sure, I said. One more. We curled up on the couch and she pressed play. The movie was unsettling from the first frame, glitchy, grainy, strange. Partway through, Sarah got up to use the bathroom, leaving me alone with the flickering TV. I sat there, increasingly uneasy. Something about the film felt too real, like it was watching me back. And then, it started looping. The same scene, over and over. Some woman hitting a TV remote, breathing heavily. I grabbed the remote and tried to switch the channel. Nothing changed. What the hell? I muttered, unnerved. Then the screen went black. I heard something behind me. I turned slowly. My breath caught in my throat. There was a woman standing there. Gaunt. Her face was misshapen, her skin stretched unnaturally tight, and her eyes, deep red, hollow, angry, locked onto mine. I screamed, Sarah, help me! But Sarah didn't come. The woman lunged forward, her icy hands gripping my throat. I gasped, clawing at her arms. I tried to call out again, but the air was crushed out of me. My vision dimmed as she lifted me effortlessly, then hurled me against the television with terrifying strength. The last thing I remembered before blacking out was the sound of glass cracking beneath me. When I came to, the apartment was silent. I sat up, dazed, aching all over. That's when I noticed something glinting behind the TV, a small memory chip. I picked it up with trembling fingers and plugged it into my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. It was filled with video clips and photos of Sarah and Harris, naked, intimate, dozens of them. My stomach turned. Some of the videos were shaky, hidden camera style. It was clear Sarah had been recording him without his knowledge. Panicked, I rushed to the nearest police station. I couldn't stop shaking. I wanted them to tell me it was just some kind of prank or mistake. But it wasn't. The remains they recovered from a ditch outside the city were Sarah's. She had been dead for weeks. The person I had been living with. It wasn't her. It was her ghost. When I handed over the memory chip, the officers grew silent. I think they believed me, or at least understood something strange had happened. I never went back to the apartment. Still haunted, I requested to review the office's security footage, What I found shattered me. For 27 days, every single camera showed me walking alone, talking, laughing, eating, sitting next to no one. Every time I thought I was with Sarah, I had been alone. In disbelief, I tracked down the taxi driver from the night Sarah jumped out. He looked uncomfortable as soon as he saw me. "Madam," he said cautiously, "I don't know who you were talking to that night. From the moment you got in, it felt wrong, like something was riding with you, but I couldn't see it. When you screamed and told me to stop, I felt something enter the car. That's why I left you there. I'm sorry, madam, but you were alone." A few days later, I visited the cinema where we'd watched that movie. The ticket clerk told me I'd come alone. Everywhere I looked, every detail, there was no Sarah. Not anymore. Just echoes. She'd been trying to show me something. Her presence had never been malicious. It was desperate. Desperate for peace. I went back to the police, insisting they follow every lead. Eventually, the truth came out. Sarah had been blackmailing Harris with those recordings, hoping it would scare him into taking her back. Instead, he snapped. When she refused to delete the footage, he strangled her in a fit of rage and dumped her body in a remote ditch. For weeks, he acted like she had vanished without a trace. And that horror film that looped the same scene over and over, the one where the woman is suffocated and thrown into the screen, it wasn't a film. It was her memory, her final moment. She was trying to tell me. Harris was arrested for murder, and I still see her sometimes, not often, just enough to know she got her justice.